You're welcome. My guest is an advocate for positive parenting. She's a psychologist and a certified family life practitioner. She is the founder of Parenting Support System Limited, an organization that helps parents to create a serene family life without losing control. So you know if you have an all well-rounded child, then you know that you will never lose control. And when we talk about losing control, parents, you know what I'm talking about. Meet my guest, Oluwatoyin Ogunkanmi. Hi, how are you?
Hello, for having me, ma'am.
Nice having you. Thank you for coming. So about this raising children without losing control, because many people will tell you, look, I lose it every day, you know. And I also know that you are the advocate for this campaign, No Yelling.
Yes, no yelling.
How do you parent without yelling, without losing your head, without losing control? I mean, many will tell you it's impossible, but I know there's a school of thought that says it, it, it's 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 workable. So let's talk about
Okay,
how to parent
so
without yelling.
so thank you, viewers. Thank you, Aunt Muti, for having me here. Raising children, I would say, starts with you being in partnership with God. That is the first basis of you having children. He's giving them to you. Then the second step in raising your children is you, the parent, being in a state where you are emotionally stable, you're physically fit, and you're mentally capable to raise these children. Now, when you raise your children, when I say raising your children without yelling, when you yell, you're meant to yell for the fact that there's an emergency. You're meant to yell for the fact that you want to catch your child's attention in case something negative is happening. But when you're disciplining your children, when you're raising your children, and all you do is shout at the child, yell at the child, you end up raising yellers. You end up raising children that get comfortable to shouting and screaming. You end up physically, it affects you as a parent because psychologically there are so many effects to yelling. So as parents, when you yell at your children, apart from you damaging the psyche of your child, it also affects you physically in terms of your blood pressure, in terms of you having headache. And most times when parents shout at their children, they always have this guilt as in, I shouldn't have done that, so I should have spoken to this.
But there's some that will tell you that's my voice.
That's not their
That's
voice.
my voice.
Because
That's not my voice.
they don't talk to their bosses like that in the office. Or if they go outside and they have to talk to people, they don't yell at people. They talk to people with their natural voice. But most times parents yell is because they've lost control.
Okay, as a psychologist, what actually triggers those response?
Okay. It's mostly a learned activity or learned behavior. It's something they've learned over time. And something you're used to, it becomes second nature to you. So if you've grown up in a house where your parents are yellers, your brothers, they shout at you, your siblings, everybody screaming in the house, naturally you end up yelling. Then another reason why parents shout at their children is because they've lost control, and that is just the easiest thing. It's like, something you do second nature. What can I do next? You want your child to stop doing something, and the next thing that comes to your mouth is just to shout, come on, stop there, get away from there. And when you do that, the child becomes startled. It affects the child mentally in the long run. Because children that are yelled at and shouted at, they end up having this anxiety attack and anxiety disorders over time. And any small, the child goes, and I wonder, why are you scared? What is wrong with you? But because the child is already used to that atmosphere of, that negative atmosphere of yelling and screaming, the child tends to have anxiety attack and anxiety disorders.
Wow. So that's a lot. It will take a lot to now unlearn.
You have to unlearn that behavior.
To now begin to learn.
Yes, you now learn. So one thing I
one.
tell parents that parenting is a continuous process. It's a continuous process of you have to unlearn the negative behaviors. You have to relearn new behaviors in terms of raising your children.
Okay, so let's talk about raising a well-balanced child. How do you go about raising a because we've seen now that there is need. Because sometimes one end is okay, you find another end there's a problem. And that begins to affect even the part that has been that you've worked on
That
for
that
a
you
long
think it's
time.
okay.
So how do we begin to raise? There's need for it. So how do we go about raising well balanced
children? Okay, so I want to use I want to use my anchor. I want to take my anchor from the Bible. There's this verse in the Bible in the book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 52, that says, "And Jesus grew in stature, in wisdom, in not in wisdom, stature, in terms of
favor
with
men.
God and favor with men." Yeah. So those are four basic areas that we need to look at our children. So when we talk about a child growing in terms of stature, that is the child's physical development.
Okay.
When we talk about a child growing in terms of wisdom, that is the child's mental and intellectual capability of development. When we talk about a child growing in terms of favor with God, that is the child's spiritual development. And when we talk about a child growing favor with men, that is the child's psychosocial development. So as a parent, your basic role is to promote those four areas in the life of your child. You need to promote your child's physical development, psychosocial development, mental and intellectual development, and spiritual development.
Yeah.
So that is when you are raising a well-balanced child. Because once you have a child that is balanced in all these areas, the child ends up becoming a well-adjusted adult. So that's why, and funny enough, that's our major goal at Parenting Support System. To raise, we provide parents with practical tools and information to raise well-balanced children.
And then well-balanced children, of course, becomes well-balanced adults in society. Yes. And it goes on to a well-balanced organization when people are balanced. And of course, a well-balanced world. Yes. Okay, so let's take it one by one. How do we, let's start with the physical.
Okay. So for the physical, how do you raise a child? What do you need to look at in terms of your child's physical development? What does the child eat? Is he eating healthy? Do you have time in terms of, is he sleeping well? In terms of his exercise, does he do exercise? These are all things that are important to raise a child that is physically fit. In terms of his health, do you do regular medical checkups? Very important. So under the physical, your child has to eat a balanced meal, has to eat a healthy meal. It's not you giving the child junk to eat. You now have to give the child a proper balanced meal in terms of the protein, the nutrients, everything that will make the child to grow properly. Very important. Your child needs to sleep adequately, needs to have proper amounts of sleep. It goes to bed. How many hours of sleep? For every age, there's a particular number of hours that is required for your child to sleep. So it's very important that your child sleeps right, the right number of hours. Then in terms of exercise is very good. It allows the circulation of blood in the system. It helps the brain to develop well. Is your child...
Okay, even in this season of Corona, no outing, but we should be able to
do some certain form of exercise. Okay? So let me use my home for example.
School.
So let me use my home for example now. The particular time in the day when they go out to play basketball and football, then we have the exercise thing in the house, because we need to ensure that they are getting the required exercise. Their blood needs to flow. They need to shed all the weight in terms of the food they've eaten, but they need to move. Then in terms of health, right from the growth area, right from when the child grows, did you take the child to the hospital for the proper immunization?
Okay.
Have you gone for the necessary health checks? Those things are important. But most times we just tend to assume that my child is good now, my child is healthy. They don't need that. But they need all those ones. They need to go for eye tests, they need to go for the teeth, all those things that make a child healthy. It's important. So that's in terms of the physical development of the child.
Okay, so mental and intellectual development.
Okay, so for the mental development of your child, that's your cognitive development. Your child has to grow. There's this thing called milestones. There are milestones your children need to attain at every stage in their lives. Once you're raising your child, you have to ensure that your child, you have to make sure you're checking to ensure that your child meet the required milestones. But for parents, you need to know that every child has his own milestone. So
Okay.
for the fact that your friend has a child that is 2 years old, and the child that is 2 years old can write and read, and your own cannot write and read, don't panic. Your child has his own milestone that your child needs to achieve. And there's something I say whenever I teach or I train parents, is that every child is unique, every child is special. Every child has his own special abilities. So as a parent, your job is to be able to identify this uniqueness in your children, to help them to develop this uniqueness and nurse those uniqueness and create an environment where this uniqueness can thrive
yeah.
and succeed. So I always like using my home. I have 3 children. My older one is 16. My next child is 14, and my baby is going to be 10 next month. Each one of them, they have their special ability.
Now, not so baby. We have that.
No, but they know now. Each one of them, they all have their own special abilities. The person that is a creative to the core. The person that has the body intelligence, that uses his body, that one uses it to the full. Because we've identified these things and we've helped them to develop themselves. So let me give an example. My older son, he is more of the, I won't call him a fickle, but he loves to read. We've identified that in him, that he loves to read. We have identified that in sciences. We identified that he loves to write. We've identified these things in, and we've created opportunities and areas for him to excel in that. My younger son, he loves his football. He loves his sports. So we've created an environment for him to develop in that area. Then my daughter, she loves to draw. No, she loves to write. She loves to dance. She loves to do things with her hands. So we've identified that. So most times when we talk about mental and intellectual, parents think that it's only about logical. No. Yeah. It has nothing to do with logical or verbal intelligence. That's just 2 out of all the intelligence. We have about 8 or 9 intelligences that different children actually possess. So your role as a parent is to identify that uniqueness in your child and develop it. Another thing in terms of mental development, you need to expand your child's knowledge base. How do you do this? You help your child to, in terms of materials your child would use to increase his knowledge base. There are children that are visual learners. There are children that are auditory learners. There are children that are kinesthetic learners. They need to touch and feel. So let me use my home. I like bringing it back home. My older son is an auditory learner. So when he wants to expand his knowledge, he loves to listen. He loves to read too. My younger son, for us to get him to expand his knowledge, he has to watch. He's a visual learner. He has to see what he's learning. Then my daughter, she needs to touch because she's the creative. So she needs to touch. So for parents, you need to expose your children to different knowledge. You need to expand their knowledge base by exposing them to different materials using the learning style. So if you have a child that does not like to read, the child might like to learn using another method. So expose the child to materials use learning style. Then apart from that, you have to expose your children to, in terms of their creative thinking, you have to teach them to think creatively. Out of the box. It's not everything you just give to them, mommy. So there are times your children will come and ask you certain questions. Throw the question back. What do you think? How do you think you'll be able to solve these things? You are teaching them to become creative thinkers. Intelligence, very good.
Okay, so let's go to the third one, which is the spiritual or the social.
Okay, let's talk about the spiritual. Okay. So for spiritual, there's something I tell parents, that there's no grandchild. God has no grandchild. God has children. And your role in the life of your child is to teach your child to have an experiential knowledge of who God is. So let me give an example. We all learned while growing up, we all learned about Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo. We know a lot about those people, but we only have the head knowledge about who they are, but we don't know who they are in terms of persons. And it's the same with, I will use my faith now. In terms of Christianity, We learn about the Bible, we learn about all the stories in the Bible. But it's your role as a parent to ensure that your child has a personal relationship with God, where your child gets to have an experiential knowledge of who God is. Not just about the fact that we're reading about God, oh, God is Father to everybody, but you teach your children to have an experiential knowledge. Let them feel, let them know who God is by themselves. You know, there's this now, by the age of 13, there's a research that's gone on that by the time your child becomes a teenager, your child has already decided in his heart.
Yes, has a formed opinion about
the faith.
God, about faith.
So that's why it's very important when the child is young, you teach. You know, the Bible says we should train. So when your child grows older, he will not depart from it. And teaching is not preaching. Teaching is you modeling what you're teaching your children. So if you have faith, if you believe in God, your children should be able to see the faith. Not just you talking about it. No, you have to serve God. You have to serve. Your children need to feel and experience God by seeing you as a parent. It's very important.
And so they too can have stories to tell about their own experience. I've had situations where my daughter will say, what will mommy do
in this kind of situation?
Or when we're talking and I say something like, I think you need to pray about it. They understand.
Oh, yes.
Because they've been able to go through that experience by themselves.
Yes.
Okay, so the final one, which is our social.
Okay, so the psychosocial has to do with your child's emotional intelligence and in terms of how your child relates to other people. We want to raise children that are self-confident. We want to raise children that have a healthy self-esteem. I don't say high self-esteem because high self-esteem might end up becoming the child being proud. Yes. A healthy self-esteem. We want to raise children that are caring, children that love other people, that have empathy, compassion. So that's the psychosocial part.
You see that missing a lot in our society.
A lot, yes.
You see an accident, victim on the floor.
Just
to think of how to help.
It's just taking pictures.
It's taking pictures. Don't look and go away. They're snapping, they're recording, they're posting. It's like, I posted first. News flash. You know, so we need to, how do we go about raising children who have empathy, compassion, who are loving, who are kind?
It starts with you, the parents. Are you loving? Are you kind? Are you compassionate as a parent? You know, the thing about parenting is what you do is what your child would do. It's not what you say. And the mistake a lot of parents make is we tend to do a lot of talking. We talk a lot. We don't act. So we now have to start acting in the way that you want. So for parenting, for raising a well-balanced child, I said starts with you having a relationship with God and with you, the parent, equipping yourself with the right skill and knowledge to raise that child. And you always have to start with the end in mind. What type of adult do I want to have? This child God has given to me, what type of adult do I want this child to be?
It's important that once you're married as a family, you should have your family vision and
plan.
Goal.
Yeah, you have a family plan, family
what do
vision.
You want? Why are we coming together
as a family? It's very important. And you know the thing about raising children, it shouldn't be by default. It should be something you should be deliberate about. You know, because in this part, maybe not in this part, maybe in the world generally, people just assume that once you get married, the next step is for you to have a child or to have children.
And after 6 months, you're not having, they'll be asking you questions, what's going on. Yeah.
So it's very important as parents that as couples or as people dating, do we want to have children? It should be important. It's not everybody that should have children. Are we going to have children? What plans do we have for these children? How do we want to raise this? It's a plan. It's like, let me start by 18 years plan. So which school can we afford for these children to go to? How many children should we have? Are we going to go on vacation? Can we afford going on vacation every year? You know, it's a plan. It's not something you just do by default. I'm pregnant. Hey, what will happen? It's time for the baby. Oh, I've not bought my things. You know, it's a plan. So raising children, you need to be very deliberate. It's not something you just do by default.
Okay, so my guest has been Oluwatoyin Ogunkanmi, and we'll be talking about raising a well-balanced child. And like she has identified 4 areas that we must take cognizance of, and that is the physical, the spiritual, the social, and the mental intelligence of every child. I want to say a very big thank you for being my guest on the program
Thank
today.
you for having
and
me.
for sharing these nuggets and secrets that we need. I think if we all begin to try our best to observe our children, know their special traits and characteristics, it will help us to help our children become better people in society.
Yes.
But the most important thing that I've learned today, that it begins with you.
Yes.
Thank you
It
so
begins
much.
with your partnership with God.
And you. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
I'll be meeting my second